Good morning. Good morning. I'm back for our second installment of the Joseph story. If you watched the last video, you remember that we talked about Judah and Tamar and their experience and their situation back in Canaan. But we also talked in the previous video from that how Joseph was placed in a pit and sold down to Egypt. So this is continuing the story. Of course, Joseph was in that pit. He was in that well. And Judah was the one who came up with the idea to sell him instead of killing him. So by the time Reuben, the older brother, he comes back to find Joseph already out of the pit, and he has no idea what happened to him. He's gone. So he's very upset. And this is where our story continues today. So if you have ever been in prison or you have ever been in a situation where you feel like you have no control, maybe it's a prison in your mind, this is the lesson that you want to listen to today. This is the story of Joseph and what happens to him down in Egypt. So this is just one installment. Next video is going to finish up the Joseph series, the mini series within this Portraits of the Past that we're talking about. And we're going to carry on to some more interesting characters that are in the Bible so that we can continue that family line that we see in Matthew and Luke and see all of the ancestors in the Bible of Jesus. So today we're going to talk about the prophet in prison. The prophet's in prison now. So he goes from a pit into a prison. You're going to see exactly how that happens. So after Joseph was sold by his brothers to the Ishmaelites, we're seeing this in Genesis 38. Reuben returned to the cistern, saw Joseph was not there. He tore his clothes because he was so upset. That's a way of showing that you're mourning or in despair. Reuben went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there." So he obviously wasn't involved in this selling Joseph down to Egypt plot. So this is what happened with Joseph's robe. They got Joseph's robe because remember they took it off him before they threw him in the pit, and they dipped it in goat's blood. They took it back to their dad and they said, "Look, do you recognize this?" And of course, Jacob's going to say, "Yes, that's my son's robe." So he tears his clothes. He's very upset because he believes that an animal killed Joseph. And in the meantime, Joseph is down there in Egypt being sold off to Potiphar, as we talked about in the last segment of this. And he becomes a servant in Potiphar's household. So can you imagine what he was going through? Here he's in a foreign land. He is now a servant, a slave, instead of the favorite in his father's household. So now moving on to chapter 39. The Lord was with Joseph, so he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. I just want to touch upon this word prosper for a moment because a lot of people bend this word out of proportion, make it into something that it's not. God will prosper us, and the meaning of prosper is to make successful, to make successful. Now, some people take that word and they develop it into something else. They develop it into something that, God's going to make you rich and he's going to make you important and he's going to do all these things and you can expect them. And I don't believe that's what the word prosper means. Maybe God will make you abundantly wealthy. Maybe God will put you in an important position. But that's not what we're seeing in this story. So the proof is here in the story that success just means God is with Joseph in his trials and tribulations and is helping him through to be successful, to be a success in whatever situation he's in. Obviously, he's not going to be rich in prison. He's not going to be rich as a slave. So this is just bending it out of proportion. So the meaning of prosper is to make successful. And this has become synonymous with, all kinds of different things. But that's not what prosper means, as you will see. So when his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in the eyes of his master. So we see Joseph is doing everything right because God is with him. And now because God is with him, he has found favor with people. So he finds favor with his master, and his master puts him in charge of his entire household. Now we remember back in the story of the servant going to get Rebekah for Isaac, and that head servant was the one who went to get her. He was in charge of all his master's riches. He was able to give out those gifts and all those things. This is the position now that Joseph is in. He is still a servant, but he is the head servant. All right. So now Joseph was very well built and handsome, our Bible says. And after a while, Potiphar's wife took notice of Joseph. So now Potiphar's wife, we don't know how old she was, but she was married, and she wanted to have an affair with Joseph because Joseph was around the house a lot, and he was taking care of things. And the master would leave and take care of his business dealings. So Joseph was the one who was there. And so Potiphar's wife took a liking to him and wanted to have an affair with him, but he didn't want anything to do with her. The Bible actually says, Joseph said to her, "How could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" So as we see the favor of Potiphar's of Potiphar in his own home, we see the devil creeping in with the advances of Potiphar's wife. Okay, so that's how it works in life. That we are in a spiritual battle between the kingdom of good and the kingdom of evil. And whenever something good happens to you, whenever you're promoted, there's always going to be something there trying to trip you up. Okay, but Joseph knows better. Joseph knows not to get involved with Potiphar's wife, but Potiphar's wife is angry because she has been rejected over and over again by Joseph. So this is what happens. One day she caught him by his cloak, but he left the cloak in her hand. So she went out and grabbed him. "Come on, I want to be with you." And he just, ran, and he left his cloak in her hands. So she takes advantage of that situation, and she wants to do Joseph in. So now she's going to get back at him for all of the refusals of her advances. And she calls the household servants and says, "The Hebrew, he came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed." And she shows the cloak as proof. So then when the husband comes home, he comes in and she says the same thing to him. "Look, that Hebrew that you brought here, he wanted to sleep with me. And here's the cloak as proof." So when Joseph's master heard the story, he's angry and he throws Joseph in prison. Now there's a special prison there in Potiphar's area, and that is where he is sent. So God showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put him in charge of all those held in the prison. And the warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. So that is what we see going on here. So here he is in the jail, but he's in charge of the jail because, of course, the prison warden sees that he is successful and prospering because he is with God. God is with him and he is with God. So this is the story of Joseph, and we see that he's stuck in this prison now. We have no idea when he's going to get out until we read the next part of the story. But this is something that I thought about, and I wrote a few words down about, am I free? I want you to ask yourself that today. Am I free? When you do something a long time, it may not feel oppressive. If Joseph was in prison all his life, it would not feel as bad as it did being put in prison at the age of 17. He had known freedom. He had made choices for himself. He did not have people telling him what to do and where to be every waking moment, like in prison. So We can be in a prison and not know it. We can always have been there. Or it could have happened gradually and we were not aware. We also allow ourselves to be imprisoned by an idea or a custom just because a lot of other people believe it. And then we buy into that. That's what we do. Every lie is a cost to us. It costs us dearly to believe things that are lies. And when we believe those lies, it is like we are in a prison in our minds. So I want you to think about that today. I want you to think about Joseph. Here he is physically in prison, but his mind was not in prison. He was free to think those truthful things that God put in his mind. And it says in the Bible, God was with him. So God is with us too. And God wants us to break down all of those barriers that are between us and him. God is with us, but between us and him, there are barriers and there are lies, things that we believe that aren't true, ideas that we buy into that aren't true, customs and traditions that we go by every year and different things that we do. We buy into these things because everyone else is doing it, or most of the people we know, that's what they believe. And what God wants to show you today is he wants to set you free from those things which make you feel as if you're a prisoner in your mind, in your own self, in your own soul. So I want you to ask God today, what are those things that I'm believing that you would like me to be free from? And just like Joseph, you're going to see God helps him get free from prison. And God will help you get free from whatever those things are that you feel stuck and imprisoned by. I want you to have a wonderful, wonderful day and a wonderful weekend.